Cool.
Okay.
Okay, let's start today's seminar. So today's seminar speaker is Disha Bhatia. Yeah, she will talk about Frugal UNX model with non-minimal flavor violation for B2SLR anomalies and neutrino mixing.
Okay.
Disha, please start.
Okay. So thank you. So we start. So this work is our recent work, which has done in collaboration with Nishita Desai and Amol Dige, and this is regarding the recent highlights of flavor anomalies which we see. So let me start by summarizing what I'm going to present in this talk. So So we know that there are several B2S anomalies which LHCb has reported, and all of them are pointing unanimously towards lepton flavor universality violations. So now, in order to explain them, there could be several solutions. Now, the path which we choose is to explain them using the Z prime solutions. Okay, so when we talk about Z prime, it has to be embedded in a gauge symmetry. So we choose a simple UNX gauge symmetry for the purpose, and we determine the charge assignments of the particle using principle of frugality. So what do we mean by frugality? Frugality means something which is minimal. So we demand that we have to add minimum set of particles as we go ahead in explaining the anomalies which work for the solution and following bottom up approach. So by bottom up, we mean that we don't start with a well motivated UV symmetry. We start at low scale and then step by step, assuming that we have to add minimum particles and desire minimality, we find out the charges of the particles. Now, what do we find is that the allowed solutions, they favor non-minimal mixings for the D-type quarks, and also they favor all the charges of fermions to be non-zero under this Uvanix symmetry. So the symmetries which we determine, they could be well tested at the future runs of the LHC. So this is the summary of what I'll cover in the talk. So before starting, let us discuss some of the basics of these anomalies. So first of all, let us begin understanding the lepton flavor universality of the standard model. So we know that standard model is characterized by certain gauge interactions, and then there are these interactions with the Higgs called Yukawa interactions. So gauge interactions to a very good degree of accuracy are universal when it comes to their couplings with leptons. So for example, over here I have just written the branching ratio of Z to EE and branching ratio of Z to mu mu. So you see, over a very good degree of accuracy, they are same. Similarly, for branching ratio of W to E nu and mu nu, they are almost same. So that means that experimentally also we have verified that there is lepton flavor universality when it comes to interactions mediated by the gauge bosons. However, we know that the violations occur through Higgs. Why? Because the Yukawa coupling is proportional to the masses, right? So for electron, it's proportional to Me. For muon, it's proportional to Mu, which are certainly different. But however, since the Yukawa coupling is so small in comparison to these gauge couplings, so its effect is hardly visible. In fact, we haven't measured the direct Higgs to EE, and there are certain bounds which have started coming on mu mu. So the only effect which we can see is through the kinematics, that okay, we have some final state which involves electrons versus muons. So if you are sensitive to the mass, so we might see some difference, but that will be only mass difference, but not the difference because of this gauge interactions. So suppose now we have to ask ourselves a question, that suppose we want to see lepton flavor universality violations in standard model, then certainly it cannot be these tree level processes, because they are so enhanced that in order to see some new physics effect, one would need to do a lot of background reduction. So they are not favorable. So any process which is favorable for new physics certainly is a rare decay process, because in standard model only the number for that process is small. So when it is small, it gets sort of comparable to any new physics edition, and we might hope to see new physics soon in such processes. So then one should look for rare decays. So then what kind of rare decays? Now there are several rare decays. So processes like which involves B, which a B meson or a B or a hadron baryon going to some excess which carries the strange quantum number to LL becomes a good testing ground. Now, why we are saying that this is a good testing ground, it will be clear very soon. So just to recapitulate, we know that in standard model, all generation of quarks and leptons, they carry identical charges, right? And what is the outcome of it? The outcome is that there is no tree level flavor changing neutral current. So the only place where tree level efficiency arise occurs at one loop level, right? Because we know that we will have some mixing matrices, V rotation dagger, V rotation, and there will be this charge matrices which is proportional to identity, and this would just give us V dagger V equal to 1, and it is just X charge. So we have to go to one loop processes if we have to look at FCNCs. So these processes are usually mediated by the W bosons, and we can hope to see FCNC processes like B to S gamma Z and then LL, T to C gamma Z LL, tau to mu gamma Z LL, etc. Right? So we can see any of these processes. So these processes are highly suppressed in standard model because they arise at loop level. So they may be a good testing ground. Now, but which process to choose among them? The answer is simple, because these processes very closely depend on what is the loop particle inside this FCNC mediating processes, and they're very sensitive to its mass. So it goes as mi square by mw square. So if we immediately know that any FCNC process which is mediated by TOG would be the most dominant one, and the TOG mediated FCNC processes means we are looking at flavor changing processes of D-type quarks, right? So then they become a good testing ground. But now, what kind of flavor changing processes of D-type quarks? Because there are three types of them. So then it turns out that the decays of B are special. Now, why is that so? So the first reason is that its mass is greater than lambda QCD. So then it opens up more phenomenological channels. Not only that, it is also largely dominated by short distance physics because it is away from the QCD scale. So then it becomes special. So we can look at the FCNC processes concerning B quarks. So furthermore, so we have two options, right? So we have B to S, we can look at decays like B to S, or we can look at decays like B to D. So these are the only two options available with us. Now turns out that B to S is more enhanced because it is proportional to the VCKM angle, which the component VTS, whereas B to D is proportional to VTD. So VTS is larger than VTD because VTS is theta 2,3 and VTD is 1,3. So 1,3 is much suppressed than 2,3. So turns out that B2S is more enhanced. So that is why it makes more sense to look at processes which are B2S, because they will have slightly larger statistics and would be the first one to see at the experiments. Okay, so we can look at B2S. But what kind of processes concerning B2S? So we can look at processes like B2SLL. So we can look at them either in isolation, that suppose, okay, we think that we may look branching ratios of B2SLL, or we may look at the branching ratios, sorry, this is a typo, branching ratio of B2X mu mu over branching ratio of B2X EE. So either we can look at them in isolation or we can take their ratios and see them. Now the ratio is good because what happens that these branching ratios have these form factor uncertainties, right? So we can calculate this process involving this partons, B parton going to S parton, etc. But when it comes to hadronization, we rely on inputs from lattice or another things where we have to calculate this form factor. So there are form factor uncertainties. So if we just look at plain branching ratio, so taking the ratio is good because the form factor uncertainties then cancel out. So hence these ratio observables are special. And also, since the branching ratio is order 10 to the power minus 7, so it is also quite rare. And the chances to see some new physics in these processes is enlarged. So that is why so much of interest has gone into looking at these B2S processes. Now, over here is a summary of what all experiments have performed so far. So the experiments have measured this ratio RK. So RK ratio is actually a ratio of B plus to K plus mu mu divided by B plus to K plus EE. And you see the LHCb recent measurement has become quite away from 1. So this is at the moment 3.1 sigma away from 1. So standard model in this appropriately chosen Q square bin predicts this ratio of RK to be 1. However, at experiments, you see it approximately close to 0.85. And now both the statistical and the systematical uncertainties are small. So that's quite a good achievement from LHCb. Now, Bell is still far behind, but we hope that it will soon pick up and would help to guide the LHCb predictions that whatever they are seeing, whether it is correct or not. LHCb, meanwhile, has also started constructing these other ratios. So, for example, it has constructed a ratio of B plus to K plus mu mu by B plus to K plus mu EE. It has also constructed the similar ratio in the neutral modes, B0 to KS0 mu mu and again B0 to KS0 EE. So recently, last week only, it has published results for this. And you can see that it also is showing a similar sign. So its mean value is away from 1. However, at the moment, the statistical uncertainty is large. So one has to wait to see whether it is in sync with what we are seeing over here or not. But yeah, so LHCb has been measuring several of these ratios, as you can see, with the K plus, K short, K0 star, K star plus. It has also started to measure these modes for the baryonic decays in lambda B. And it has also, so apart from this ratio observables, it has also measured some of the angular observables for B0 to K star 0 mu mu and B plus to K star plus mu mu. It has also observed some discrepancies over here, and several of the branching ratio measurements, which are dominated by form factor uncertainty, still are showing some deviation with respect to standard model. So in all, there are large number of variables which we can see, which are sort of away from the standard model prediction. So certainly, this points towards some new physics beyond the standard model, if hopefully there is not something wrong with the experiments. And the good thing is that these anomalies are not dominated by systematic. So systematic seems to be under control. It is only the statistical uncertainties which are being dominant. So hopefully with more data collection, LHCb would be able to give us a better picture. And we also hope that Bell 2 would also soon pick up to be able to match with the LHCb predictions. And LHCb in continuation will also provide more updates on the new ratio, so that not just in one single channel, but in plethora of channels, we are sure that there is something happening. So definitely this seems to be exciting, and this is the exciting time, since nothing beyond standard model is to be seen, and this is like one ray of hope, and we really hope that this does not disappoint us. So yeah, so then assuming that there is something which pinpoints toward new physics, then certainly the next question which we have to ask ourselves is that what kind of new physics it has to be. So so there are active global fits which actually pinpoint towards what direction which we should follow. And let us understand that. So first of all, let us understand how to parameterize the effective Hamiltonian for B to SLL transitions. So let us start from this simple fact, which we know that. So whenever we do this one loop corrections, suppose we used to do E plus so E gamma, E plus gamma. So that correction, so that's at tree level is proportional to gamma mu. But when we do it at one level, then this could be understood in terms of Gordon's identity, that this effective vortex which appear at one loop level becomes proportional to this vector current, and there is this sigma mu nu q nu kind of a current. So that is what it happens at one loop. So now similar to that, we can understand that if we have effective B to S interaction in standard model, then one can hope to write the effective operators generated or the effective Lorentz structure generated in terms of these currents. So how do they look like? So one current is just this with PL, PR appropriately like inserted. Then we have this O9 and O10. So this O9, O10 are very important operators. So what do they represent? So they represent a mediation of B to S. So this is is having this left-handed helicity because this is a current which is mediated by W. And then we have L bar gamma mu L. And then O10 is just the one which corresponds to the axial current. Now why? So we can simply understand that whenever we have some diagram like this, so since this is mediated by W in standard model, so this structure is always going to be left-handed, right? So this is always left-handed, but then we will have one mediation by photon. So this would always pinpoint towards leptonic currents. So this giving rise to say LL, this giving rise to LL. So then this comes from W, and this vector like leptonic current can be thought of as coming from photon, right? But instead of photon, we can also have a Z. So instead of photon, we can also have a Z. Now Z gives contribution to both vector like and axial like currents, right? So then this comes from vector Z part, and this comes from axial Z, the current of the axial Z. So hence these operators could be simply understood in terms of the standard model, and their values in standard model is known to be very precise at next to leading order, and this is the value of Wilson coefficient at the MV scale. So now what we have to do is we have to predict some new physics to that. So we can say that, okay, so there are various options, that suppose we have this B to S, right? So suppose this is still mediated by W. So that means we fix this current. We don't change this current. But instead of a Z, we can introduce a Z prime, right? So we can introduce a Z prime. And then that Z prime can give corrections to either vector like or axial like, depending on how Z prime is coupling to the standard model fields. So that's one possibility. Another possibility is that we also introduce a W prime. Then if we introduce a W prime, then this PL simply gets replaced with a PR current. So that is what happens. And then, okay. So then we can think of this in terms of following operators. So this O9L, so we can either correct these operators which are already present in standard model. So this can simply be done with the Z prime. So a Z prime appropriately charged, or we can have some O9 prime contributions, which would also in principle involve a W prime or some like prime contributions coming from Z prime current. So we can have all of that. So turns out that global fit favors new physics contribution in combination of 4 of these. Now what combination depends on like what is our assumption, whether we want new physics in one direction, two direction, etc. So that depends on that. So if we naively consider the expression of RK it goes like this combination of Wilson coefficient in mu direction divided by combination of Wilson coefficients in E direction. Okay. So we know that RK is observed to be less than 1. Okay. So what does it imply? That if new physics has to affect only muons, then it has to be destructive, right? Because it has to be destructive in already present SM values. Or if it is affecting electron, then it has to be constructive, or it has to be combination of both, depending on what we choose. Okay, so turns out whatever anomalies I showed was actually favoring, so most of the channels involve muons, like the branching ratio observables and the angular observables, they involve only muons, and it is only the ratio observables which involves electrons. So there is slight preference to have new physics, not slight actually, quite a lot preference to have new physics in muons than over electrons. So if we have to look at one-dimensional fits, so one-dimensional fit favor new physics in muon, so C9 NP mu, or C9 NP mu equal giving minus C10. So this is just left-handed, left kind of a combination. And 2D global fits favor new physics in a variety of these Wilson coefficients. Now, what do we choose? So we choose that, okay, let us suppose there is this new physics, but present only in C9. So by C9, we mean that the new physics Z prime, it talks to only vector like to leptons. It talks like the lepton should be charged vector like, so only C9. And we also demand it to be present in C9e. So that is what we demand. So what happens with that? Okay, so sorry, let me erase. Okay. So this is a global fit plot, a comparison plot, which we have taken from two of the fits. So you can see that they favor new physics combination in muon and E. However, with E, we know that there is no preferred direction as such, because as I said, the branching ratio observables are like sort of in agreement for electron, but not for muon. So electron seems to be like sort of, it could be both plus and minus, because other observables are seeing it to be fine with standard model. But however, muon clearly has to be negative, because C9 SM is positive, and in order to get a destructive interference, we should have a new physics which is negative. So that is what they are telling. Now you see there are these field contours and unfilled contours. So field contour is the one which has come up after this 21 like Moriond update, and these unfilled contours are the one which were present from the 2019 Moriond update. So they are just showing that with the new data, the uncertainties are now shrinking, and this blue and green corresponds to two different groups. So because of their different assumptions of taking hadronic uncertainties, etc., they are slightly different, but more or less they point towards the same direction, that there should be some new physics in preferably negative of C9 mu. And also you see now with this new data, the magnitude of C9e should certainly be smaller than the magnitude of C9 mu. So in our model building, we will impose these two conditions as like a necessary condition to find out what general symmetries we can determine to have explanations for these anomalies. So maybe I'll pause a bit to ask if there are any questions. Hello. Okay, I don't see any. So shall I just go ahead?
Yes.
Okay. I hope it is clear and I'm not speaking too fast.
No, it's very good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll just go ahead. Okay, so now we have set up this general background, and now we'll come to how we find out the symmetries. Okay, so following the global fits, our minimal requirement is to introduce new physics in vector currents. Okay, that is O9 mu and O9. So this is the minimal requirement. And how do we do that? So this can be done either using Z prime or leptocore. However, we pick the solutions which are Z prime like, so that is U1x. So as we mentioned that RK like or any other ratio observable, if it is predicting lepton flavor non-universality, that means the X charge assignment for E and mu is certainly different. And also, since the global fit favor less new physics for the electron sector than the muon sector, so certainly the X charge of muon should be larger than the X charge of electron. So that's one of the criteria. And another criteria is that we demand this dominant Z prime effect. So that means we want Z prime to have tree level efficiencies. So that will only happen if we have unequal X charges for the D type quarks. So at least for the D type quarks. So this is our minimal requirement. Now with this, we could have written one EFT and we could have tried to say that what is the requirement to like get satisfy the anomalies, but we want to go ahead and we want to find out these charge assignments. So we will follow a bottom up approach and it will be clear that how we do that. So what do we do as a first exercise is that we have all these standard model fermions, right? So we assign them some random charges, so which are all at the moment unequal under U1x, and also we assign this charge to the standard model Higgs doublet as some a this, and so right now everything is unknown. So now we'll follow some theoretical motivations and some experimental considerations to see how we can constrain them. So the first criteria is that we demand vector currents. As we said, we want anomalies in O9 or C9 kind of a thing. So we want vector currents. So, and we also want the theory to be anomaly free at high scales. Right. So this can be easily done if we simply assign vector-like charges to all the fermions under this new U1x. Okay. But since we do not have right-handed neutrinos, so we need to add right-handed neutrinos for this vector-like charge assignments to work. So we assign vector-like charges and add 3 right-handed neutrinos. So since we are adding 3 right-handed neutrinos, so this implies there might be some implications with the leptonic of these symmetries with the neutrino mixing pattern, so which we'll come to it eventually. So as of now, out of simplicity, the anomaly cancellation can be done by assigning vector-like charges and 3 right-handed neutrinos. So this is also very simple and very economical way of like handling this. So how does our generic U1x symmetry now look like? So we can write a generic U1x symmetry as some alpha times B1, some alpha 2 times B2, alpha 3 times B3. Similarly, alpha E, alpha mu, alpha tau. So this symmetry is some B minus L kind of a symmetry, but modified D minus L kind of a symmetry. So remember, from this big table of having different charges, this simple assumption has landed up to 6 different charge assignments. So that is quite economical if we add 3 right-handed neutrinos. Now also, since we demand anomaly-free condition, so with this we would have one simple condition on the charges, which would be like sum of these charges to be equal to 0. So that makes us like total number of free parameters as 5 against 6. So that's good. Then another thing is that if all the fermions are carrying equal charges, then in order to generate the correct fermion mass, like Q bar Q times the Higgs, so Higgs doublet should be chargeless. So we also put the charge of Higgs to be 0. Now another thing which happens with this is, since we have vector-like charge assignments, therefore the axial combinations of lepton, the L bar, gamma mu, gamma 5 L, these combinations vanishes. So that's also one good thing. So we begin with that. Now what do we do next? So the next thing is that if we start with this charge assignments, then you see we have unequal charges of first and second generation. Now that can be problematic from the KK bar mixing perspective, because KK bar mixing is really stringent and it pushes the new physics scale to really high scales. So in order to avoid that, we can look at how kk bar mixing contribution affects us. So you see there is some this mixing matrix, and you see it gets multiplied by the charge difference of first two minus charge difference of third and second, and there are these mixing angles involved. All right, so we know if we follow this minimal flavor violating kind of a structure where these mixing angles are similar to the CKM mixing angles, and we know the first two generation angles are quite large in comparison to the second, third, and the first and third. So then this combination is the dangerous contribution which we should remove. So this could be easily done if we choose the first two generation of charges to be same, and only the third generation charge to be different. So which we can do that. However, on doing that, we see that when we try to generate VCKM, since the Yukawa matrix is now only having this off diagonal terms for the 1-2 sector, because the charge of first and second are same. However, first and third and second and third are different. So we do not generate these elements. So since these elements are zero, therefore the diagonalization of this matrix would give rise to only the 1-2 mixing angle and not the 1-3 and the 2-3 mixing angle. So CKM is generated only in the 1-2 sector. So that's not good. So we want to generate CKM properly. We don't want to get away with the observation. So this could be fixed very simply and very minimally by again adding one more doublet, but whose charge is now the difference of charge of first and second, the difference of charge of first and the third generation. So upon doing that, you see we can generate Yukawa matrices terms with this new doublet, which are kind of 3-1-3-2 and 1-3 and 2-3 terms. So now combining this new physics doublet and this old doublet, so what we can have is we can have a correct CKM matrix generation, and with VCKM given as the mixing of VUL dagger and VDL. So now, since the constraints from the up sector are less stringent and we want to have a lesser number of free parameters, we can simply assume that this VDL matrix is coming to entirely from VCKM. So this is a choice which makes the scenario more predictive. So in this choice, the VDR mixing angles are also suppressed. So we fix as our starting point this assumption that, okay, let us assume that VDL is equal to VCKM. So the choice of alpha 1 equal to alpha 2 and VDL equal to VCKM actually renders us minimal flavor violating like mixings, since the BB bar mixings are now just entirely governed by the CKM parameters as they are done in the standard model. So then that is good because we know MFV is sort of a favored kind of a structure. So we can begin with this. So what we have done so far? So far we have like introduced a Z prime so that we can have efficiency at tree level. We have introduced 3 right-handed neutrinos to account for vector-like charges and anomaly cancellation, and we have introduced a second Higgs doublet which can generate the correct CKM mixing angles. So is the particle addition which we have done enough? The answer is no. And why? We need to add just one more particle besides whatever we have added, and that is a scalar singlet S. Okay, so why do we need to add that? So the first concern is, so right now, the only scalar particle which is charged under U1x is this doublet, right? So this doublet is charged under U1x, but apart from U1x, it is also charged under this electroweak charges. Like this is charged as 2 of SU2 and it also has a hypercharge. So that means both the electroweak symmetry and this new U1x symmetry are getting broken simultaneously. So which is not good because that means the scale of new physics can be highly constrained from the colliders. So that's one worry. So if we want the Z prime to be heavier, then we want the scale of Z prime or the U1x breaking to be disentangled from the scale of electroweak symmetry breaking. So let us say that we want to achieve that. Now there is another concern. Another concern is that we have these two doublets, right? So we have phi SM and phi nu physics, and both of them carry identical charges under SU2 and U1Y, but however are differently charged under U1X. So phi SM is a singlet and phi nu physics carry some charge. So with that consequence, we can write the scalar potential. And you see, in the scalar potentials, independent rotations of phi nu physics and phi SM are allowed. So why is that a problem? So suppose these independent rotations we characterize as vector axial rotations. We can always do that. Suppose we have two rotations, theta 1, theta 2, we can always characterize them as vector axial rotations. So upon doing that, we see a phi SM gets rotated as e to the power I theta vector minus theta axial, and phi nu physics gets rotated as vector plus axial. So these rotations are allowed. Now upon the electroweak symmetry breaking, you see this rotations would also be broken, right? These independent rotations. So this vector like rotation or this U1V can be simply identified as the hypercharge, because we know they are charged under hypercharge. But this additional axial rotation which does not have any counterpart in SM, and it gets additionally broken, because of which we have a massless pseudoscalar. So that's the problem. If we have two doublets with different charges, we need to break these charges. So maybe a common example I can say with this is that, remember when we do a 2-hex doublet model, so often we assign it as Z2 charge, right? So that we do not have dangerous FCNCs at tree level. So we assign it a Z2 charge, but we break it using this M12 term. So we break this Z2 charge using this M12 term in the potential. So why is that done? Because we want to avoid getting a massless pseudoscalar. So this problem is similar to that. So instead of them having different Z2 charges, they have different U1X charges, and they result in a massless pseudoscalar. So we don't want to break it like this by adding a term by hand, explicit breaking. So what do we do instead is, we do not break it explicitly, but we add one particle, which is S, and assign its charges such that this term is allowed by U1X symmetry. So that means the U1X charge of S and the U1X charge of phi mu physics are equal. So this term gets allowed by this combination. So then by introducing of this S, we have achieved two things. First, we have disentangled the scale of breaking of U1X from the breaking of electroweak symmetry breaking. And second is, we have also managed to avoid the problem of massless pseudoscalar at the tree level. So, okay. So then let me summarize. So this is our particle content. We have three right-handed neutrinos. We have this phi nu physics and S. So we call this charge simply as XS. And we know that from theoretical consideration, these charges must satisfy normally equation. We have added right-handed neutrinos, assigned vector-like charges. Then KK bar mixing demanded that first two generation charge should be same. So alpha 1 became equal to alpha 2. Then this consideration we have to keep in mind while deriving the sign, the Wilson coefficient C9 mu, that it has to be negative. And the charge, so what do we see from this whole construction is that we have managed to constrain charges of the quark sector, but so far the charges of the lepton sector are not too constrained. We just know that X charge of muon should be greater than X charge of electron. Apart from that, we do not know anything. We still have some arbitrariness in the lepton sector. So the question is that, can we remove this arbitrariness? Because this is sort of not good. So the answer is yes, because remember, we have three right-handed neutrinos in our setup. We also have the singlet scalar in our setup, which is appropriately charged under U1X. So if we want, we can generate the masses of these neutrinos using type 1 seesaw mechanism. So that is good, because that would actually help us to constrain the lepton charges. So let us see how it does that. So now we want to take hints from the allowed neutrino textures. All right. So we know there are three right-handed neutrinos, and we know there is a singlet S which breaks Ionic symmetry. So when it breaks, so this can also couple to this right-handed neutrinos, right? So then we can write a Majorana mass term after S has broken symmetry in terms of MRIJ plus Vs times YRIJ. So this MRIJ would be non-zero when the charges would sum up to zero. Alpha I plus alpha j would sum up to zero. And this term would be non-zero when the charges would sum up to plus minus s, right? So essentially, we want to have charge assignment such that if we have a nu I nu j term, so suppose we want to write a nu I nu j term in the Lagrangian, plus we want to couple this term, we can also couple this nu I nu j term with either S or S dagger. So if the charges are suitable, then these terms would be non-zero, and then we can find out what is the right-handed mass matrix. So then, okay, so then on doing that, we can use type 1 seesaw mechanism to determine the masses of this active neutrinos using this. And this is related to the observation that UPMNS MUL diagonal, UPMNS transpose. Okay, so now, so our aim is actually to constrain these charges alpha E, alpha mu, and alpha tau. So how can we do that? So what we can do is we can actually go to the basis where MD and charge lepton mass matrix are diagonal. Okay, so once we go to that basis, then what we can do is we can find out the allowed textures of MUL using the measured data, and the allowed textures of MUL then feeds to what is the allowed textures of MRS. And then the allowed textures of MRS actually helps to constrain the symmetry combination of these charges, alpha E, alpha mu, and alpha tau. So we use this allowed texture. So we have followed this paper to do that. And okay, so we know that for neutrino sector, experimentally there are 9 parameters, right? 3 mixing angle, 3 phase, and 3 mass terms, among which we know 5 quantities. So then we can allow at max, so that means 4 quantities are unknown. So in a complex matrix, at max we can allow to have 2 zeros, right? Because 1 zero would correspond to a 2 relation because it's a complex matrix. So 2 texture 0 matrix are allowed. So we use that information to determine the symmetries of MRS. So we find out these following symmetries are allowed if the charge of S, which is the excess, is equal to plus minus A. So some A times alpha L mu minus L tau, or A times L mu with excess equal to plus minus A. Similarly, A times LE minus 3L mu plus L tau, or A times LE plus minus 3L mu minus L tau with excess equal to plus minus 2A. So here A is some overall multiplying factor. So if A is 1, then the charge of excess is plus minus 1. If A is 2, it's plus minus 2. So sort of it scales. Okay, so we now know what are the combinations which are possible from the leptonic combinations, right? Now we can club with our previous knowledge that excess is equal to alpha 1 minus alpha 3 by 3. That is, it is given by the differences of the charges of the quarks from the first and second generation. And we also know the anomaly equation, right, which relates the charges of quarks to the charges of leptons. So it turns out that we can determine all charges in terms of A. So what do we do that? We fix A by normalizing the charge of mu as 1. So that is how we fix A, and hence we find out all these symmetries. So now you see that the symmetries over here and the symmetries over here bottom differ in excess, because we had found out from the previous slide of the allowed symmetry combinations sorry, with excess plus minus A, right? So for plus A we can find one set, for minus A we can find another set, and that is how we have these 3 sets. So we call the first set where excess is negative as categories A, B, and C with these scenarios, and where excess is positive with categories A, B, B, and C, C with these scenarios. So note that these scenarios have same leptonic combinations, but their core combinations are different. So that is why they need to be clubbed as different symmetries. And we are clubbing the scenarios with same excess under one. So this would help us to constrain the flavor physics constraint, because they are largely B2S depends on the product of excess. So that is why we have categorized it in this manner. So these are then the leptonic symmetry combinations, which uh, helps us in actually reducing the arbitrariness of the charge assignments and help us to pinpoint that, okay, one needs to look at this. Okay, so maybe I'll just pause again to see is there any question. Okay, I see no hands raised, but please ask question, because in that sense, I would know that I'm not speaking fast, or I'm able to transmit whatever I'm saying. Okay, okay, so I see no questions. Okay, I will go ahead. Um, okay, so I'll just summarize anyways what we did so that it becomes more obvious. So remember, we talked about flavor anomalies. So there are flavor anomalies in B2SLL sector. So Global Fits told us that these anomalies should definitely predict some new physics for the muon sector. They like electron sector, it can or it cannot, but necessarily in the muon sector. So then we followed the approach that, okay, we'll try to find out a generic new physics combination using the global fits, which predict both new physics in electron and muon sector. And electron, it is okay if there is no new physics in that sector. So for example, this combination L mu minus L tau and L mu has no new physics in electron. Alpha is 0. It's just new physics in muon and tau. So so that's the thing. So that was one input. Then we had started with the generic charge assignment, right? We had started with the generic charge assignment over here. Sorry, it's going too back. Yeah. So then our task was that we want to explain these anomalies simply by a Z prime solution, where we have some tree level B to S, then we have Z prime, and this Z prime then can go to LL and dominantly to mu mu. So this was the minimal thing which we wanted, and we wanted amplitude of this to be greater than amplitude of B to S to EE. So that was our minimal requirement. So then we thought, okay, we'll find out the charges in a bottom up approach. So we assigned random charges. Then after assigning random charges, what we did was we followed certain principles. We followed certain principles of anomaly like cancellation at high scales. So to do that, simply we had added 3 right-handed neutrinos. Then there were some considerations from KK bar, so which made the first 2 generation charges same. Then from global fits, etc., we know that sign of C9 mu has to be negative. And then since the lepton sector was unconstrained, so we used hints from the neutrino sectors to determine some of the symmetries, which could then combine with the other constraints to give us nice set of total U1x symmetries. So now our task is that from following these considerations, we have these symmetry combinations, but we do not know yet whether they satisfy B2SL anomalies or not, right? Because over here we have not like try to fit C9 mu. We have just said, okay, the sign of mu should be like greater than what E is, etc. But we have not actually checked whether it is satisfying or not. So now we need to do that. So let us start with finding out the effective Hamiltonian for B2S LL processes. So the effective Hamiltonian for B2S LL processes can be easily found out by integrating out this heavy Z prime and giving us basically essentially a point or a contact interaction between BS and LL operator. So we can do that. And once we do that, we can find out what's the new physics contribution to this look like. Now, there are two things which are very essential over here is that this crucially depends on the product of XS into alpha L. So XS is nothing but alpha 1 minus alpha 3. Okay, so since this is a flavor changing neutral current, so this is sensitive to the difference of the charges of the quark generation and also multiplied by the charge of the lepton generation. Okay, now since we had fixed the sign of alpha mu to be 1, so then the sign of C9 mu becomes sensitive to what the sign of XS is if we follow this assumption of VDL equal to VCKM. So we are in the minimal flavor violating regime. So the sign of C9 is sensitive to sign of XS. So that means, remember in the table we had both XS positive and negative. So that means only now the negative XS would work, the positive ones will not work because negative XS gives the correct sign of C9. So hence from from this bigger table, we select only the first part of the table where XS is negative. Okay, we had here we had only chosen contribution where you see magnitude of alpha E is smaller than magnitude of alpha mu. It is never becoming equal. In our one of the previous work, we also had one category where at that time the magnitude of alpha E equal to alpha mu was still favored, but over here it has become disfavored. So we have now shrunken the table. Okay, so yeah, so we have also clubbed these symmetries into various categories because the B2S measurements are sensitive to alpha 1 minus alpha 3. So then it becomes furthermore important to club them like this and not separately. Okay, so then let us look at the results. So what do we do is we present the experimental results in the plane of the gauge coupling and the mass of the new gauge boson. And in this plot, we have done a comparison of the results which existed earlier with the results which are existing now. Okay, so let us first look at these pink bands. So these pink bands are actually the allowed constraints from global fits and neutral meson mixing. So earlier, you see, there was this large statistical uncertainty because of which the bands were like broad. Now, since the uncertainties have reduced, so you see the bands have shrunken. The allowed bands, they are now getting shrunken to more and more accurate values. So that's one thing. Also, the constraints from colliders have become quite stringent. So everything on the top is disallowed. So everything on top of this dotted line is disallowed from 13.3 Fem to 1 inverse theta, and everything on top from these lines are disallowed from recent 140 Fem to 1 inverse theta. So now you see this allowed band which is lying over here from flavor is actually lying inside the disallowed regions from the collider data. So this happens for all the categories, category A, category B, category C. So the allowed flavor bands are lying inside the disallowed bands from the collider. So everything is ruled out. So if we assume minimal flavor violation, so everything is ruled out. So we in our previous work actually had done minimal flavor violations 4 years back. At that time, these symmetries were allowed because you see this was the allowed data and this was the constraint from the collider. So that time these were allowed, but right now with the current data, everything is disallowed. So then what should we do like so there are two ways to handle this problem. So first of all is maybe we can try to think of adding more particles, maybe which will reduce, the branching ratio of z to mu mu, so that if the branching ratio of z to mu mu gets reduced, then these collider contours would shift upwards, right? So these collider contours may shift upwards if we reduce the branching ratio, or we can try to shift this global fit contours downward. So these are the two ways which we can do if we have to have a combined solution. So we do the other way around. Like we do not add any more particle to shift the collider band upwards. Rather, we see what can we do to shift the flavor contours downwards. So that's the approach we follow. Okay, and that approach, like maybe like we can guess that it might be some non-minimal flavor violating kind of solution. So why non-minimal flavor violating? Because we know the criteria of MFE, all it said was that new physics has to lie close to the TV scale. Right. So now if we introduce non-MFE, then we can allow for heavier new physics. And this constraints from actually colliders is actually pinpointing us towards slightly decoupled new physics. No, large mz prime and low gz prime are like it is sort of favoring. So we need to go towards decoupled solution. So maybe a slight non-MFE might work. So that is the trick we use. So then we saw that the scenarios with VDL equal to VCKM, they are ruled out. So then to bring collider constraints compatible with the global field, we need to essentially compensate for this ratio, right? So if this ratio needs to be small, then maybe we need to multiply something which is big so that this ratio can be like controlled. So then we bring back this VDL angle over here and we say that this is not equal to VCKM. So then this factor is not cancelling. So this factor is not cancelling over here. And we call this factor as R mix. So when this R mix is greater than 1, then in principle, we can have scenarios which may be allowing simultaneously the collider and the flavor constraint. And also we have one advantage of this factor, and that is earlier this factor was 1, right? So we were relying only on excess negative solutions, right? But now since this factor is not equal to 1, it can also be negative, so that we can also have excess positive and excess negative solutions. So we can allow for both solutions. So that's also the advantage of going to non-minimal flavor mixing. So for simplicity, we consider a very simple scenario where this VDL now is only described by theta 23, because that's the minimum mixing we need anyway to describe B2S. So then we say that, okay, it's only in theta 23. And then this R mix, if it is greater than 1, then in principle, we can opt for solutions which are slightly decoupled. But however, we have one problem over here, and that problem is, you see this C9 or this operator which involves B2S through Z prime LL, right? So it is sensitive to R mix, which is this difference of mixing. But however, if we look at neutral mixing meson constraints now, so that's B2S whole square, right? So we have B2S Z prime and we have again B2S over here. So this mixing gets proportional to R mix whole square. So that means we cannot go on and on and on with like decoupled solutions, because at one point this R mix and R mix square are going to violate each other. So there won't be any consistent combined solutions. So that means we can allow for non-minimal flavor mixing only until these two are in sync with each other. And that is what I'm saying when I derive this C9, C for this BS. The Wilson coefficient for BS base bar mixing, that is proportional to R mix. So that just tells us that this sine theta 23, it cannot be too large, the new mixing angle. So that one needs to take care of. And another thing is that since C9 has to be negative, so when excess is negative, this combination is positive. So that means this combination positive, meaning sine theta 23 is positive, because CKM is always positive. And when excess is positive, then sine theta 23 has to be negative to account for the negative sign. So that means for symmetries with excess less than 0, 2 theta 23 should lie in the first quadrant, and for symmetries with excess greater than 0, 2 theta 23 should lie in the second quadrant. So that's a takeaway from this exercise. Now let us go to results. So here are our results for this mixings. Now let us just focus first on this plane. Okay, so let us just focus on this. So we see here we have plotted these bands in different colors. So these bands in different colors represent the choices of the mixing angle, the new mixing angle. So this pink band is when this new mixing angle is exactly same as the CK mixing angle. So that's this band, and that's disallowed, that we had seen earlier also. Now this theta 23 CKM is close to 2 degrees. Okay, so now we go slightly higher. So we go to 5 degrees. So you see, because of 5 degrees, we have started coming towards this decoupled regions. So we are able to push it towards here. And with 6 degrees, we are now lying over here. Now, one thing which you might notice is the width of the bands. So width of this band is larger than this, and this band is quite small. So why is this happening is because of the reason I mentioned earlier, that this BB bar mixing goes as essentially square of R mix square. So square of R mix square, which is sine 2 theta 23. Sorry, the handwriting is very bad. So essentially square of this. Whereas, so this is BB bar mixing. So mixing, whereas C9 goes as just sine 2 theta 3. So at one point, they stop to coincide each other. So you see the bands have started to become thin, and I cannot increase non-minimal mixing for this category beyond 6 degrees. So with 6 degrees also over here, you see everything lies in the ruled out region. Like we could not save this category even with non-minimal mixing. Now, in contrast, see this category, theta 2, 3, when then we increase to 5, then we increase to 10, you see there is some hope. So whatever is lying above is ruled out, and whatever lying below is allowed. So you see this band lies in the allowed region. So this solid line is, by the way, the current LHC exclusion. Okay, so you see with this non-minimal mixing, we can have some regions which are still allowed. However, with 3000 Fem-1 inverse, this is again lying up and this will be probed. So the good thing is that with non-minimal mixing, some of the categories can be saved with the present data, but the future data might be completely probed. So then this scenario is not at all unpredictable. So you can save with definite like confidence that either we'll have it or we'll not have it. So that's one thing. So similar to category A and B, category AA and BB are mirror images of these categories, sort of, in terms of flavor constraints, because all they depend on is roughly the excess and the sign of this alpha mu, right? So, and also this R mix. So when excess is negative, R mix takes over, and R mix actually, so over here excess is negative, R mix is in first quadrant. Over here excess is positive, it is in the second quadrant, such that it takes over. So 90 plus theta 23 CKM is identical to theta 23 CKM over here. Similarly, 90 plus 5 degrees is identical to 5 degrees over here. So all these are mirror images of each other. However, the collider constraints are different, and that's because when we look at the charge assignments, so excess over here is just the mirror image below and above, so that is fine. But the collider constraint, which is the direct constraint, depends crucially on these charge assignments, the individual charge assignments, which are different in the lower and the below category, right? So that is why, although the flavor constraints are same, the direct detection constraints from colliders, they are different. So that is why when we compare these collider lines, you see they are lying at different places. Okay, so yeah, so then, uh, so with this, I have just summarized whatever I said over here. So another thing I want to say is that the category A and AA, even with non-minimal flavor mixing, stays disallowed. Now, what are these categories? These categories were the categories with leptonic combination L mu minus L tau and L mu combination. So these categories, even with non-minimal flavor mixing, stays disallowed. And the categories which are allowed with the current data is the combination with Le plus minus 3 L mu minus L tau and one more. So sorry, let me just, yeah. So the combinations which are allowed is this, and this. So these combinations stays allowed. So what does it tells us? It tells us that the allowed combinations favor new physics in all three generations of leptons and as well as quarks. And another thing it tells us is that the charge of the lepton sector should be necessarily smaller than the muon sector, but right now the favoring thing is that it should not be non-zero. Otherwise, in the minimal setup, these will be disallowed. As we saw this L mu minus L tau, etc., staying disallowed. Of course, one can save these combinations, category A and AA, by introducing some new state, some say dark matter state, where Z prime decays dominantly to that XX, and we could reduce the branching ratio so that we could so along with pushing it downwards, we could also push it upwards. So of course we could do that, but that would be not a frugal setup or the minimal setup. So we wanted to work with the frugal or the minimal sector by adding particles with whatever were the utmost necessary particles to be added, and we found this results. So also just to highlight that how this BB bar mixing constraint can become incompatible with the global fits at larger mixing angles is this goes as R mix square and this is just R mix. So you see the overlap between these two uh, is now small, or I mean negligible for higher values of mixing angles, right? Only when this mixing angle is small, you can aim for some finite overlap. So this dark blue line shows the finite overlap. However, this does not overlap when this mixing angle is large or maximal. Over here 45 was the maximal. So yeah, so to summarize, so we discussed about several B2S anomalies pointing towards lepton flavor universality violations. Then we discussed the Z prime solutions as the potential explanations. We determined these charges and we added minimal particles which were needed. So we added 3 right-handed neutrinos, a doublet and a singlet apart from the Z prime. Then the allowed solutions, if we do not if we following the principle of frugality, if we do not add any new particle, necessitated that there should be some non-minimal mixing in the left type D quark sector. And also we saw that there are non-zero charges for all three generations of fermions with the present data. And we also saw that these symmetries would be actually tested with the future runs of LHC. So then the scenario is promising in the sense that we would know for sure with the coming data of LHCb and the coming data of LHC, we would know for sure whether Z primes, like the minimal Z primes, can be a solution for such possibilities or not. So yeah, so thank you. So this is it.
Okay, thank you very much for your nice talk.
Thank you. I hope it was clear. I mean, but please ask questions if there are.
Any questions from audience? So could you go back to 27, page 27?
Yeah.
No, one more before. Yeah, here, I have question about the colloidal limit. What is the bump?
What is the?
What is the bump?
Oh, oh, I think this is some, I think some thing in the extrapolation. This is not physical bump.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, this is some extrapolation thing. And yeah, so this is the 3000 fem to 1 inverse, and this is at the current luminosity 140 by CMS.
Mm. So,
So no questions. Okay.
okay, maybe the talk was very clear.
Okay. Okay, so then I'll stop share. So I'll send you my slides after this.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, then thank you very much, Disha Pati.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for giving me this opportunity. And if you guys have some more questions, you can write to me. Like that should also be fine.
Okay, then let's and